So we're confident that with some of these, this series of trainings, that you guys are going to be better armed, better enabled to serve your customers, work with your partners, and then more importantly, go out there and win. So as we said, we're going to sharpen your skills. We think it's going to be a very valuable use of your time. And that is why it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Doug Dvorak. Now, Doug is a world-renowned author, speaker, consultant, and he's the CEO of the Sales Consulting Institute. Now, he has worked with companies like Ritz-Carlton, Intel, Merrill Lynch, Bridgestone, the list goes on and on and on, including Cisco. Now, he's earned a reputation of delivering powerful techniques and tricks and tools that all of us can use as salespeople. I think you're going to find that it's going to be inspirational, motivational. You're going to feel the energy, and you're also going to see a little bit of humor. Now, as Lynn said, this is a series, so there's 8 different sessions in total, coming in 4 different topics. This is the second of the topics around baseline knowledge, and it's really focused on the sales approach, the sales discovery, how do you do effective presentations, how do you handle objections, and then closing. Now, I know there's some of you out there that have been veteran salespeople for many, many years. You're going to pick up a couple tricks. And for many of us that are kind of newer in our careers or newer to sales, I think you're going to find this is also going to help you guys be better. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Doug, and take it away, Doug. We're excited about today.
John, thank you very much. Thank you, Lynn, and thank you to the Cisco team for having the forward thinking to take advantage of this downtime to train up the Cisco sales organization. This is the first in a series of overarching themes, Project Thrive, Spring Training, and today's webinar, Accelerating Your Sales in Today's World. It's a high honor and privilege to be with you here. The senior leadership team thinks so much about everyone on the U.S. commercial team, the APO team, the USPS team, as well as the partner community, that they wanted to give you the best sales training out there. So this is series 1 in the first. And it's best-in-class sales teams like you that have never had more responsibility, and you have to react in real time to these new market dynamics. So our hope, goal, and challenge for you in today's session is to provide you with 6 pillars. 1, motivational best practices, and we're going to spend some time on that. Also on the approach to selling, the discovery phase, and the presentation, handling objections, closing strategies, and then some bonus tips and strategies. But as John mentioned and Lynn mentioned, there are veteran sales professionals that have been with Cisco for many years that sell multi-million-dollar solutions. For some of you, this might be a revisit of some of those skills that perhaps you haven't thought about in the last few years. For some of the partner sales organizations or actual partners of Cisco in the APO organization, this might be a reminder or might pique some interest to approach a dialogue, a discussion, an existing relationship, or a new relationship in a number of ways. So for those seasoned veterans and sellers early to their careers, as well as the partner community, there's something for everyone. And I know the veterans are going to stay engaged and help those new to the organization that are new to sales with some of these back to basic selling skills. David and I present about 50 times a year, primarily in person, but there's an old adage, experience is a great teacher, but the tuition's too high. Part of our first pillar is motivation. So we're going to share with you now your own unique motivational style. I've put on the screen right now 4 symbols and 4 symbols only. I'd like each and every one of you to identify with 1 symbol and 1 symbol only, and that's going to share with you your own unique motivational sales style. So how many of you identify with the red starburst relative to motivation and sales? That's telling us you're well organized and methodical. How many of you identify with the blue cube? That's telling us you're bold and decisive. How many of you identify with the gray pyramid relative to motivation and sales? That's telling us you're obsessed with beer and lack of sporting events. How many of you identify with the yellow cylinder? Too late, the joke's over. So Cisco, for the attendees today, conjures up, means different things to different people. But for the purpose of today's webinar, accelerating your sales in today's world, a new sales normal, a new business climate, I submit to you and invite you to consider that I'd like you to look at Cisco in the context of today's webinar in creating impactful sales conversations and outcomes in a different way. Coco Chanel, a storied designer, said this: you have to be different to be remembered. And today you have to be different to be remembered in the new sales normal. And we want to come out better. We don't simply want to survive, we want to thrive. So I pose the question to you, One Cisco. 30 days ago, what was the purpose of selling? It was focusing on building that focus, that confidence, that self-belief. It was effectively planning for future and current customer or prospect calls. It was progressing opportunities through the pipeline. And back to some basics, it's important to talk to suspects, but it's really important to talk to prospects. Prospects have four things: need, money, desire, and authority. Need, money, desire, and authority. So when we're talking to prospects, are we moving them through and those opportunities through the pipeline to a logical next step? And are we maintaining high activity levels? As you know, prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, children and pets were not allowed at the office. Now they are. So it's sort of changed how things are working, how you're working in a virtual or new sales normal environment. But today, what is the purpose of selling? Continuing to build that focus, not just surviving, but thriving, that self-belief, that enthusiasm, that recognizing the only thing we control is our attitude, and effectively plan for future customer and prospect calls. My challenge to you each and every day, focus on three big things that you want to accomplish from a sales perspective to move an opportunity or opportunities forward through the pipeline in a new way of thinking, through having to work through more emails, virtual selling, WebEx, and maintaining those high activity levels and staying positive in a challenging time. So you see four images up on the screen now. I want to pose this question to you. What are the key factors that distinguished top salespeople from everyone else? Number one, strong goal clarity. Number two, high achievement drive. Three, healthy emotional intelligence. And four, excellent social skills. Strong goal clarity, high achievement drive, healthy emotional intelligence, and excellent social skills. Of those four, what is the multiplier of sales success? High achievement drive is the multiplier of sales success. And that starts with the right attitude of motivation and best practices in the new sales normal. High achievement drive is the multiplier of success. Maintaining the right attitude with yourself, taking care of yourself and your family first, and then taking care of your customers in this new sales normal. High achievement drive. But it's a roller coaster, right? If we had our hands up and we were at Six Flags, it's a roller coaster. It has been, it continues to be. But I submit to you and invite you to consider that there is light at the end of the tunnel. We will come out better. We will survive and thrive in the Project Thrive and in spring training. But I want to revisit what Chuck Robbins said, your Cisco CEO. In these challenging times, be a leader, but be human. Be a leader, but be human. I think, dovetailing what Chuck said in his sage advice, I think when the dust settles, we will realize how very little we need, how very much we actually have, and the true value of human connection. We will get through this. We just have to connect with our customers in a different way right now. So I'd like to take you to Italy, not literally, but figuratively, to the Vatican in 2005. Change has been happening for the last millennia, as soon as we got bipedal as humans. 18 years ago, the Spanish flu epidemic. If I take you to the Vatican, 2005, the inauguration of Pope Benedict, I'd like you to take a look at that image. Fast forward 8 years to 2013, see how that image has changed. Fast forward 7 years to the same spot, the Vatican, Pope Francis, and his special Urbe et Orbe blessing. No one there. It's like a science fiction film, the reality in which we're dealing. It's time to change the way we approach the new sales normal. Whenever you came out of the womb back X amount of years ago, you had a finite amount of hours in a day, 1,440 minutes. 1% of that day is approximately 14 minutes and 24 seconds. My ask or challenge of you, the ask or challenge of Cisco leadership team to everybody on today's webinar is give 1%. 14 minutes and 24 seconds to investing, getting granular and deep on these new sales skills, back to basics, the approach, motivation, handling objections, the discovery process, presentation skills, and closing skills. But commit to giving 1% more of your time, energy, and positive attitude to embrace change and these new business development ideas and strategies. Because as I said yesterday, and we had over 850 Cisco team members, one Cisco, attend our first webinar. And I shared with them yesterday, as I did today, speed is the new currency in business. This is what happens in 1 internet minute, in 60 seconds. Speed is the new currency in business and in sales. But when you see this image of 5:10, what does it conjure up in your mind's eye? If you're from Chicago like I am, about November when it's NFL or football playoffs, it's the Chicago Bears record, 5 wins and 10 losses. It's also due to Illinois' state of current government and finances. It's the price of a gallon of gas, $5.10. But May of 2010 was my COVID moment. 3 things happened that rocked my world, not in a good way. It was the most challenging thing I ever went through, but it was a blessing. The universe hit me upside the head with a sledgehammer 3 times. My dad fell out of a 3rd-floor window to his death. He didn't jump. I had a raging alcohol and opioid problem. And then May 18th, 2010, Hoffman Estates, Illinois, St. Alexis Medical Center, Doctors Building 2, 5th floor, suite 537 at 1:45 p.m. at Dr. Jeffrey Bacall's office. I was told, Doug, you've got cancer. My reaction to the big C word was the big D word of denial. Some people are denying that COVID-19 is happening and that we've had to rearrange our lives, the way we do business. But I submit to you and invite you to consider each and every one of you has gone through your own 5:10 in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Today might be your 5:10. But the power of thought, the power of attitude, the power of staying motivated can help us deal with the 5:10s that we have in our life and this COVID-19 moment. I also had the high privilege and honor to get involved with a Cancer Survivors Network. And in that group, I met some of the most incredible, rich, generous people that I've ever met in my life outside of my immediate family. Not all survived. But what we found in order to prevent a recurrence of cancer, and we had therapists, PhD, very, very focused oncologists, medical professionals, psychological professionals. You had to be lucky. You don't know. If you could, roll the dice on some complementary therapies. Get outside of that sea of me and connect with something higher through prayer, community, family, volunteering. Reduce your level of stress. Exercise more your mind, your heart, your body. live a more healthy lifestyle. I had to watch what I put into my mind, my heart, and my head. But in addition to all these other things, positive attitude, 60% of the time, in concert with these other areas, preventative or recurrence of cancer. If it did it for me in cancer, what can it do for you, your family, and your customers as we deal in this COVID-19 moment? How many of you have shit on yourselves? I should have done this, I should have done that. Don't wait till you have your own 5, 10, or a COVID moment. Don't shit on yourself. Invest some more time in sales skills through this awesome spring training webinar series. Don't shit on yourselves. You know, before 5'10", I always wanted to climb Everest at 29,300 feet, but then 5'10" and 5'18" happened, and I was wiped out emotionally, financially, and physically and emotionally. So as I said, the only way out is through. The only thing I could control, which was my default, was my attitude. Once I was through that, I recognized that I still wanted to summit Kilimanjaro, 19,340 feet, without oxygen. And that was so, so inspiring. My point is not to brag or be braggadocious. My point to you is each and every one of you have or will go through a 5'10" in some way, shape, form, and fashion. You will also be able to summit your Everest or your Kilimanjaro. Whilst I was training for Mount Kilimanjaro, 19,340 feet, I was working out, doing some heavy training with a backpack in Colorado. I snapped this picture of a grove of aspens on a beautiful John Denver Rocky Mountain high day, and I posed the question to you, Team Cisco, One Cisco, how many trees do you see? More often than not, the answer is hundreds or thousands. One Cisco, this is the world's largest living organism. One root system, one grove of aspens, all interconnected. If an insect with a disease bores into one of these beautiful aspens, it has the potential to take down or kill this ecosystem or this living organism. In the context of one Cisco, one bad attitude, people not doing whatever they can during this COVID moment, during this 5'10", we have to suit up and show up and give more than 99%. Otherwise, the whole entire organization of Cisco that depends so heavily on the sales team, the partner organization, Lynn's team, John's team, because when you net it out, sales is the highest paying hard work and the lowest paying easy work, and sales is the only function within an organization that adds to profits. Everything else adds to cost. So what's being asked of you right now to carry that ball across the end line, to connect deeper with your customers, to be this beautiful grove of aspens as one Team Cisco. So did Brady and Belichick put back-to-back Super Bowl wins together? Not last season, but they did. Not focused on 99%, focused on 100%. But what can happen in that 1%? Some people think not much. It's huge. You don't win Super Bowls at the 1-yard line. You don't get through COVID-19 or a 5'10" without the right attitude and at sometimes giving 100 or 101%. This is what happens in that 1% as published by the U.S. government, the statistical abstract each and every year of useful and sometimes nonsensical facts and figures. In that 1%, 12 parents will be given to the newborn to the wrong parents daily. 2 planes landing at any international airport would be unsafe each and every day. Not only major airports, primary and secondary airports. Over 20,000 incorrect drug prescriptions would be written each and every year. Cardiologists would be performing 291 pacemaker operations incorrectly. And this used to bother me. 5.5 million cases of Budweiser beer would be produced flat. John, I know you reside in St. Louis, so have a cold one or a Bud Light after today's webinar, after you go on your Peloton. 100%, it's about giving 100%. When you suit up and show up as sales warriors, it's about the right attitude. And that's what this time is requiring from us. But not to fret. Cisco leadership's got your back. You've got this, and you've got your customers' back. I'd like to share you as I close out this session on motivation, two principles. You can't really motivate individuals. Cisco leadership can't motivate you. All they can do is create a motivational environment in which you can motivate yourself. It's up to you. And the one motivational question that you'll only ever have to ask yourself, what would you do if you had only 90 days to achieve your goal, or you would lose that which you cared about most forever? So again, you can't really motivate people. All you can do is create a motivational environment in which you can motivate yourself. Senior leadership is offering up this session of sales training webinars so you can train up. There's an old adage in talent leadership and talent management. A's hire A's, B's hire C's, and C's put you out of business. You are the Cisco A team. You are the A team. A's hire A's, B's hire C's, and C's put you out of business. So as we transition out of the motivational best practice in my session, I would offer you this. Remember, the only thing you can control is your attitude. Stay positive. Remember that truly staying motivated in this COVID-19 world requires social connections in a different way: WebEx, phone call, email. Celebrate the big wins, but the small wins. Commit to 3 big things every day to moving a sales opportunity forward. Commit to motivational excellence. And I loved what Vince Lombardi, the former head coach of the Green Bay Packers, said relative to motivational excellence daily. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the commitment of excellence you make in your chosen field of endeavor. One more time. The quality of your life is directly proportional to the commitment of excellence you make in your chosen field of endeavor. Your chosen field of endeavor is a Cisco sales professional, and the only way out is through. And recognize that motivation is dynamic, not static. Maintain those highly productive, value-added sales areas of focus daily. And with that, I'd like to transition to my esteemed colleague, David Sanders, who's going to talk about the approach. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for that motivational presentation, and a lot to be learned from that. And it's an honor to be here today with the Cisco team, and I commend each and every one of you because this is voluntary, right? This is not required that you be here, but you're investing in yourself, and that's the biggest thing that you can do, especially during this time. A little bit about my background. I've been in technology sales for well over 20 years, leading sales organizations from small VC-backed firms to some of the largest companies at IBM and SAP, both domestically and internationally. And I know that we've got the government team on here, a little bit of kindred there as I led the Americas organization, opening offices in both Brazil and Canada for the federal governments. That's an interesting thing when you sell into Brazil for the federal government in itself. And for the partner organization, I did want to bring up the fact as we go through this, while a lot of what we're talking about is about direct sales, remember that right now in these competitive times, that any kind of information or anything that you can do to better support your partners, any value that you bring to them, will help them in their competition and to be better at selling their solutions, and they're going to thank you for that. Let me start out by a little bit about the roadmap, and by this what I mean is, what is the buyer's journey? And so this is when we really start looking at this, and understanding the buyer's journey today is more important than any other time. Because the fact is, it's going to change. We know it's going to change a lot. And so when you think, if you go back not that long ago, that buyer's journey was pretty simple. You had a discovery stage where maybe they would reach out to Gartner and they would gather the data. They would bring in the 3 or 4 vendors that they knew were the ones that they were going to look at anyway. They would do a bake-off, and at the end of it, they would make a decision, negotiate a contract, and then select a vendor from that. But today's environment is much different than that. You have to think about what is going on not only before this virus or before the virus,
think about all the different steps that are involved. On average, there's 7 different decision makers in every decision that's made. So you have to understand and be able to reach out to all 7 of those people, understand what everybody's role is, who those decision makers are. Understand, too, that when they start looking at the problem identification, a lot of the research that they do now because of the Internet is done beforehand. They say that over 30% of that evaluation is done before they ever talk to a salesperson. And that could be positive, it could be negative. They have talked to clients, they have done their evaluation, they've got an idea of your pricing, they know the good, the bad, and they have a perception of your company even before you have a discussion with them. So you've got to uncover that. You've got to understand their buying process. I'd also submit to you right now what's very important is you may have been working for a company with a company for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. But what's going to happen is once we get through this, and we will get through it, that buying process that they've had in place for that number of years is going to change. It's inevitable. The way that they're going to evaluate vendors is going to change. The steps that they have to go through is going to change. In some situations, it may increase. In some situations, they're going to be having to look at those projects that were on the table before, which projects are going to go forward and which projects aren't. So all of that is going to be decided in the very near future, and you've got to be on top of that to understand it. So I would submit to you that even those customers that you've got great relationships with and you've done business with for years, you need to go back to them and really go through this with them. Understand, too, the person that you've been dealing with for years may not even know the answer. As long as they've been doing it, no one is going to know exactly how are we going to get back to conducting business. And so everybody is going to be feeling their way through that. You're going to have patience with your coach as they're navigating through the waters of their own company, as well as you trying to. More than anything now, you're going to have to look at what is the opportunity. Is there an opportunity for 2020? I mentioned this a minute ago. There's going to be multiple projects, some that will be in and some that will go out. They're going to be looking at which of those are going to be there very soon. Can you compete? With Cisco products and solutions, there's going to be really rare that you can't compete. However, can you win? If it's one thing I've learned over the years is, look, if you're going to lose early. If you're challenge the client to make sure that you've got a real chance of winning, change the rules up, do something different, because sometimes the definition of course insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So make sure of that. Finally, what I'd say to you is it worth winning? You're going to have new prospects, which is great, that are going to appear. Those new prospects are the laggards that are out there in the industry that haven't kept up with technology and they realize it's a new world. The problem is the resources that they have and the people they have in place may not be able to adapt to it. So you need to make sure these new prospects, can they really adapt? Can they take advantage of it? And will they be able to thrive with your solutions? Are they going to be people that could actually absolutely fail at any kind of an implementation on new technology? The one advantage, though, that I think that Cisco, that you've got here that's just incredible, and that's when I looked at the mission statement. Shape the future of the Internet by creating unprecedented value and opportunity for our customers, employees, investors, and ecosystem partners. Think about the time that we're in today. Think about right now in the moment that we're in, and think of a better or a stronger statement than this. I would submit to you that this should be your elevator pitch, because if I was on the elevator and somebody asked me, well, what do you do? Well, my company focuses on the future of the Internet by creating unprecedented value and opportunity for our customers, employees, investors, and partners. What a strong statement. It's something that as we go into presentations, areas like that, you need to consider that would be the way that start every meeting out. So we talked about the roadmap and the different steps and what are the steps that are going to be involved. What I would submit to you also is that to make sure you probably heard of sequence of events or closed plans. I know several of you have been doing solution selling for a number of years. and we've all seen these kind of documents. Many of you have used these. Sometimes we forget to go back to the basics, and that's what I would tell you right now. It is a great time to go back to the basics, making sure that you document, and that's really all we're talking about here is documenting that buyer's journey, documenting it by the resources that you're going to need, documenting it by their new buying process, documenting it by achieving the dates that they're trying to accomplish. And the thing that I love about this the most is now you're focused on what? Their success and not necessarily selling them something. And that's something that your client and your prospect will appreciate, because if you notice, the very last thing on here is the meeting that you would have 2 weeks or 2 months after the implementation to test the results. Have you gotten the benefits that we talked about? Are you satisfied with our solutions? And then you back up. In fact, if you take a look, the contract signing is 5 to 6 line items above all the other steps that you're focused on. If you focus on their compelling event and when they need to be live on your solution, everything else will back into the dates that you're looking for. When I think of the best practices in this area on the approach, the very first thing I would tell you is when you do this and you're looking at the sequence and you understand their buying roadmap, what you're going to do is you're going to establish trust at that account. You're going to build rapport and credibility with them, that you're really focused on their business issues and the challenges that they have. What I'd also tell you is constantly validate that roadmap, because it's going to change, and it's going to change a lot as companies start navigating their processes and how they're going to get back to doing business. And everybody's going to be focusing on how do we get back to profitability as quickly as possible. Because of that, that buying roadmap is going to change a lot. The other thing I would tell you, the projects that will stay in 2020 are the projects that have high ROI and the projects that they believe bring tremendous value to their organization. The more value you bring, the better chance you have of staying in the 2020 budget. So I would submit to you those are areas that we think about on the approach of selling. And Doug, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, David. Excellent information on the approach. And I'd like to chat with you now about the discovery process and what that really means. And in terms of the discovery, the sales discovery call is a two-way conversation and an essential part of the lead qualification process. During a sales discovery call, you, the sales professional, be it a veteran or someone new to sales or someone in the partner organization, should ask specific questions to understand your customer, partner, prospect, client, their overall areas of pain or business, their budget, or their overall overarching needs. And to David's point in the approach, you want to establish that trust, rapport, and credibility, and you can do that in a variety of ways. But what we want to do is we don't want to make cold calls. We want to make warm calls. And the difference between a cold call and a warm call in the discovery process is twofold. It's research and preparation. And for those of you that sell to public companies, you may want to consider buying one share of stock in that public company. It totally changed the dynamic. It extricates you from the herd of other solutions providers and sales people, professionals, because you then can approach that prospect or customer in a totally different mindset. That you are an owner and shareholder in that company, and you have a vested interest in the financial success and growth trajectory of that organization. So establish that trust and rapport. Go to the company's website, follow them on LinkedIn. Don't get Facebook freaky and stalk them, but do your diligence, do your discovery on the individual, the organization. If it's a public company, listen to an analyst's call, a playback. If you can get 1-2 kernels of information, 3 to 4 business issues, which we'll talk about in a minute, that is huge. That is huge. So we want to establish trust and rapport, understanding your client's pain points, identify that compelling event, then articulate and demonstrate value from the client's perspective, and then establish a timeline and a next step. In a sales call, discovery call, 3 to 4 business problems should be identified and discussed in that initial or follow-up discovery call. It's common for many salespeople to dive directly into pain points for their initial part of the discovery call. However, most informative, meaningful, engaging conversations start with understanding for the plans of the business, the areas of pain, the business problems that the Cisco technology solution can solve. So the point is, through your research preparation and before you get into that discovery call, identify 3 to 4 business problems. If you do, you enjoy up to a 13% competitive advantage. Team One Cisco, sales is a game of inches. And if I can increase my odds as a sales professional, it's like being at Vegas at the crap table. If I can increase my odds of success through hard work and understanding their business problems, I can take from 53% one problem in a discovery call to 3 and 4 to 85, 81 and 85%. That's huge. This is one key takeaway for everyone on the line today. Why is it 3 to 4? Because looking at more than 3 to 4 business problems in the discovery call makes them seem less urgent. Looking at more runs the risk that your prospect, customer, partner will lose interest. And by only discussing 3 to 4 business issues, you have the highest likelihood of moving the opportunity forward, however you define that, to a logical next step. So the next slide demonstrates that the number of questions you should ask, discovery questions per each business issue, is between 3 and 4 per business issue, for a total of 11 to 14 questions for the 3 to 4 business issues. That's really important. And you want to practice that. And we're going to give you some ideas now of how to ask those pain point questions. What would be the potential impact of your solution on the client's business? Getting an answer to this question can help you understand how important your solution is to the customer, and it can also help you get a feel for the investment options or budget bucket that they have. But a few specific pain point questions is, if you could solve the problems we discussed earlier, how would it impact your business's financial situation in terms of perhaps a public company earnings per share, et cetera? If you could solve these problems, how would it impact you personally? Would it mean that you could overcome this challenge on a personal level, make your personal and professional life easier and more productive? If you could implement these changes, how would it affect your business's competitiveness in the marketplace today? I love this question. How would your CEO react if you could overcome this challenge? How would not being able to solve this problem affect you and your business going forward? And what would you like to see to some next steps? So some great pain point questions. I like visionary questions that focus specifically on business performance, growth, and profitability. The idea behind these questions is to get your prospects to emotionally, mentally buy in to your solution before they actually sign the contract. So they're thinking about how your solution, you've identified the areas of pain, how it can improve business performance, growth, and profitability. Some examples of visionary questions would be, how will this look different if you could solve this problem now? How much time do you see this solution saving you? How would you define success for yourself, for your business, and how we work together? Another example of a visionary question, if you could imagine a situation where you have no restrictions, what would you change? Can you tell me why and why you would do that? So some examples of some visionary questions. These will all be included in the deck that you receive from the leadership team. But some additional example of discovery questions that focuses again on that business financial metrics, competitive landscape. Recognize if you're in an RFP situation on the competitive landscape where you're not the incumbent vendor, that vendor is trying to create barriers to entry for you and barriers to exit for themselves. You might be set up by the competition. So be mindful of that and recognize that. So ask them about their goals. Are they customer related, financial related? Are they operational? And ask for how they're measured and managed specifically relative to KPIs. Ask the timeline, ask the challenges question, ask the budget question. And the one thing I like about the budget question is, whose budget does this funding come from? And is the budget owner an executive sponsor? That's a very powerful, focused discovery call question. Also, you may want to consider asking, are there written decision criteria for choosing a solutions provider or vendor, and who compiled these criteria? And lastly, what I like is, what's the process for purchasing the solution once you decide on it, and are there legal or procurement reviews? And as David said in the approach, it's understanding that buyer's journey. It's going to be vastly different in 30, 60, 90 days than it is now. 30 days ago, you had opportunities in your pipeline that were identified for close into Q3, Q4. Some of these might be pushed into fiscal year 21. But by understanding these criteria and having a common sales language is important. But what's more important is to understand the customer's buying journey and aligning and mapping your process, your sales process, that common sales language with the customer's buying journey. Now, as we move into the next session with David, which he's going to be talking about the presentation, I'd like to provide you with the best practices for discovery. And the three primary objectives are, remember that, research and preparation, warm call versus cold call. We don't make cold calls anymore. The two primary differences between warm call and cold call, research and preparation. If you're calling on a public company, consider buying one share of stock, listen to analysts' recordings, look for that data, get to a 10K. If it's a private organization, look to the LinkedIn profiles of the steering committee, of the C-level, VP, or directors. Identify those critical business issues. Utilize open-ended probing questions that go back to the vast and storied Big Five. Who, what, when, where, why, and how. You can customize those to make them a pain point question, a visionary question, and focus and specific question in the discovery call. I submit to you and invite you to consider, if you do those things, research and preparation, warm call, research and preparation of warm versus call, identify those critical business issues, and utilize those three types of open-ended or probing questions, pain point questions, visionary, and deep diving, you will be very successful. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to David, who will be talking to you now about doing killer sales presentations. David, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Doug. So if you think about what we've done so far is we've really looked at the buyer's roadmap, right? We've got a good understanding of what steps are involved in their selling process, and we've identified what that's going to look like. We've also gone through and now we've really discovered what the driving factors are for them, and even evaluating your solution. You've identified the critical pain points. You've identified with each person what it is that's making them even evaluate your solutions. You've identified the foes and the pros that you have going for you. So when you start getting ready to do this presentation, you really need to focus on three things: discovery, develop, and deliver. And you go, well, hold on, we just talked about discovery, but discovery here's taking the knowledge that you've already gained in those earlier surveys and now putting this together in a way to present back to the client. So the very first thing you need to do is identify what's your objective. What's the objective of your presentation? What are you trying to get across? You want to make sure that you modify and adjust it and customize it specifically for the client. You don't want to make assumptions, and especially right now, you don't want to make assumptions. To Doug's point earlier about reading your 10Ks, you want to go out and read right now how they're reacting to this virus. And you want to read as things start to open up again. There's going to be articles out there that are going to be talking about, CEOs are going to be publishing about what their next steps are and how they're going to react now to get back into business and get back to profitability. So you want to make sure that you're on top of that and make that part of your presentation. You want to make sure that you've got your own resources, the right ones, to be able to do it. And you want to focus on those critical business issues we just talked about earlier about making sure that that's what you do in the first part of the presentation. And you want to make sure that now's the time to do it. One of the reasons we talked about that buyer's journey is you can't skip steps. And you want to make sure that you talk to all the right people, you understand all the people's issues that they're having, and that's part of what your presentation looks like. In that research, you need to be asking yourself the following questions, right? What are the issues that they're facing, and how is your solution valuable to them? What are the ways that they're currently trying to solve these problems today? Can my solution solve the problems for them in the way that they need? And do I have other customers that are using our technology to solve these kind of problems similar to this? What are the savings that has our client received from these? And savings that you can relate back to the prospect as a reference. Who's going to be in your room? Who's going to be in the room? That room is virtual now, right? Because even when the business opens back up, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody's going to be congregating in offices and we're going to be presenting in a boardroom anymore, right? So who's your audience going to be? Have you spoken to each one of those people? Are you still pairing up people like you would in an office setting or in a board setting to where certain people have different roles in that? You still need to do that exact same thing in a virtual environment. So if you're going to do that, what you need to do is who all is going to be part of this? My apologies for stopping here, but I think I just got a message saying, are the slides not showing up?
I see your slides, David. I don't.
Okay. Okay. I'm not sure. Somebody just, okay. We mentioned about speaking to all the people. Have you reviewed the agenda with them, right? Is everybody there? Is there a certain time that you know that some of the key decision makers are going to be in there and how you want to present to them? As you're putting this together, you got to be thinking about your competition and how you're going to position against them. What's your unique differentiator? You know, what's the competition offering to resolve the problem? How's my solution superior? But where am I vulnerable? Do you understand that part of it? And what I would also tell you is this: hope is not a strategy. We've got the best salespeople here at Cisco, but don't dismiss the salespeople at the other company and hoping that maybe they won't proactively try to bring up areas that may be a weakness or a vulnerability for your company. So you need to hit those head on. That's part of the way that you're going to be putting that presentation together, identifying those areas. So now that we've done that discovery, we want to develop the presentation itself. We want to design the content. One of the things I would tell you is start looking where you maybe have had this in a board environment before, or you had it in going over a projector. Now understand that you're going to be going through WebEx, and some of those people that may be on that WebEx could be on their phone. So you want to test that in a virtual environment to make sure that all the material that you've got is coming through properly, and you still want to engage with the audience. I think in these kind of presentations, a lot of times you forget about how you're going to engage with it. You got to be careful as you're designing it about how the it comes across where maybe you had video before, but now, depending on the size of the audience, that video really isn't going to work in this example. As you're putting it together, it can be a daunting task. You have to be thinking about what's the first step to take. And the first step to take is really understand what your objectives is of that presentation. You always want to start that out with an elevator pitch. And boy, do you guys have a great one with your mission statement. Have you addressed it and go through the audience that's on the phone and in a virtual environment? Make sure that you address each one of them before you start the presentation. You've already gathered the data from each one of them of the 3 things that they absolutely need to see. You want to reiterate that to each person. Are there any other questions you have? Is there anything else that we need to make sure that we're covering today? You want to still line people up with people within your company. If your sales manager is in the meeting, or if you are the sales manager in the meeting, what is going to be your role? Who are you going to be engaged with? Who are you going to follow up with after the call, after the presentation, to try to get some feedback from? So I think so many times in a virtual environment, we have a tendency to sort of show up and throw up, and we do our presentation and everybody scatters because we're not even in the same room to debrief again. So you want to make sure that you put that in place about what your objective is, the strategy that you're going to have, and then, of course, engaging with the audience itself. And still practice, right, to make sure that, in fact, even more so now, because the fact is, if you've got multiple presenters, to be able to coordinate and collaborate with everyone to make it run smoothly, it's really important that you do that. So now in the delivery itself, I think there's a couple of things that you got to keep in mind. 70% of what you say in the first 8 to 10 minutes will be remembered. The stats say, though, after that, it's only 30%. And those are numbers you probably heard before. It may not surprise you, but what I would submit to you in a virtual environment, that number goes down to 10%. So imagine how important that first 8 to 10 minutes is. And I would even go down to the first 5 minutes of that. So you got to start out with stating the objectives. You want to start that presentation out with addressing the critical business issues in the first 5 to 10 minutes. The key ones, there's going to be one commonality from the different people that you've interviewed, that maybe 2 or 3 at the most. And in those, you want to make sure that your presentation addresses those within the first 10 minutes. If you spread those out, what will happen is either people will drop off and you may not be able to even see what you're talking about, or they get easily distracted. You got to make sure somebody's still managing the parking lot. You know, we've had the easel in the rooms forever that we write down the questions that start getting us distracted off the presentation, or we've got a disruptor in the room and that happens. So you need to assign somebody that's going to manage that parking lot and manage those questions that are going to come out. And we've got to make sure that you follow up properly and within 48 hours of anybody that asks that, because you don't want to dismiss those questions that are going to come up. I mentioned a minute ago about the fact that you want to make sure and hit those critical business issues right up front. One of the things that it seems like we do a lot of times is we show the engine of the car. We're showing the bits and bytes and speeds and feeds. We jump right into that in the presentation. And you're right, those are very important, especially in technology sales. You're going to want to get to those components of it. But really, people still buy on emotion. People want to feel the leather. They want to see how it rides. They want to rev the engine. That's the emotion that you want to generate. And then they look at the car, the engine itself. So keep that in mind as you're doing this. That first 10 minutes is absolutely critical of everything that you're going to do. In fact, what I'd submit to you is a lot of times after that 10 to 12 minutes, you've addressed those issues. Always know that you don't have to take up, let's say you've allocated an hour for the presentation. If you're done at 45 minutes, have a mic drop moment. I can tell you this, once you address the audience and you've talked to them and you've gone through all the areas that they've wanted you to address, and you've really accomplished your objective, the only thing that you can do at that point is lose your sale. Because anytime you talk anymore at that point in time, you're opening yourself up to vulnerability, that you open yourself up to more questions that may arise that they haven't even thought about. So know when you've reached that mic drop point and stop. There's nothing wrong with stopping a meeting early. Just a few things of mechanics that you want to make sure of, of course, in a virtual environment that's different than I think before. We have a tendency, because we're working out of the house, that, oh gosh, we don't really need to get dressed and okay, we'll sort of put on a shirt. You know what? Get up in the morning, take your shower, do the hygiene, get dressed as if you were going into the office. I'm telling you, that will be projected in your presentation, even if no one's even seeing you. It will be projected in the way that you feel about yourself. Little things. Make sure that you got your own bottle of water here, because guess what? Nobody can go get it for you. So you got to make sure that you're self-contained and self-prepared to do that. You know, have a meeting with the family to make sure that they understand that, hey, mom or dad is going to be on a call for the next hour and can't be interrupted. So we really need you to be quiet. You need to think about how you manage that. It's cute when you're on internal calls with a dog barking or maybe the kids coming in. But when you're in a professional setting and you're trying to get a point across, it's not the time to do that. Make sure you turn off your email and turn off or at least put your phone somewhere away from you, because I can tell you this, even if they can't see it, when you look down at your phone and you start to read a text, you're distracted. That may be the time that you miss a key point that's being said. Somebody may ask you a question, and now you're having to ask and repeat it because you weren't paying attention. So recognize that. The other thing I mentioned about with the noise and the kids, I highly recommend just use earbuds or some kind of an earpiece. When you're on speakerphone, on the computer speaker, that's when a lot of the background noises can be heard. And so just look at how you can leverage it that way. I don't think, 90 minutes is about as long as you'd ever want to do one. If you're going to go over that, break it into pieces, have a 30-minute break, do something of that nature to let people get a breath and, still have the bio break and all that as you would if you were in person. So what I would tell you is this, as we look at the best business practices of this, remember, you've got that first 10 minutes, and I would even submit in the first 5 minutes that you want to present the value of your solution right then and make sure that that point gets across, because you're not going to get a chance to go back and get that. In relation to that, you're also going to realize that there's going to be only 10% of what you do is going to be remembered right after that first 10 minutes. So understand that that's the part that you're going to lose. And the only way to really keep the audience's attention during that time period after that 10 minutes is engage with your audience. Ask them questions. Point out to specific people. Have them part of the conversation, because if you just present to them, you will lose them after a period of time. With that, Doug, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you, David. Well done. Great points on the presentation. And now we're going to talk about handling objections. So, are objections good or bad? Objections are good. Indifference is bad. Objections show that there's real interest at a variety of different levels by your customer, client, partner, or prospect. They're good. They're not bad. In the context of objections, indifference is bad. If you look at a relationship with a husband and wife, a son, a daughter, mother, father, daughter, or a partner, the best emotion to have is love. The worst, many people think, is hate. No, the worst emotion is indifference, because when they're at indifference, they've checked out, they're gone. When you have indifference, you've got nothing to work with. Objections are good. So we're going to talk about how do we handle objections, how do we acknowledge that objection, how do we restate it, How do we use some probing questions to validate objections? Because there's two forms of objections. There's valid and invalid. But why do we get objections? We get objections because it's a sign of interest. It could perhaps be because the prospect, client, or partner misunderstood something you said. They might be under pressure from another vendor, from their boss, the steering committee. They may not have bought into your claims. They're not convinced yet. They simply haven't made up their mind. They had to go back and justify their buying decision to an executive sponsor, or they're looking for additional benefits, or perhaps you've been set up by the competition. So what are sales objections? They're given to you by the prospect, customer, partner to indicate an unwillingness to buy or some resistance, at least not yet or not now. Not now does not mean not ever. Without sales objections, there's no need for salespeople. There wouldn't be any need for salespeople. And in our experience, and I believe some of the Cisco veterans, sales veterans, the partner organizations, people from Lynn, Nick, and John's organization would recognize that unless and until you get objections, you're not involved in serious negotiations. And serious negotiations seldom begin until the prospect's objections are surfaced. So there's a great need for you, the Cisco sales team, to understand objections. When you've mapped the great understanding through the discovery process and the approach of their business issues, sometimes they may lack purchasing authority to buy, but they raise several smokescreen objections just by default. As I've shared with you, there are indeed two forms of objections. There's valid objections, which are sincere concerns that the customer, prospect, partner may have that they need to have answered before they're willing to make a commitment to buy. Some invalid objections are simply defense mechanisms that they want to throttle down the sales process, the sales cadence for some reason. Sometimes they're just point blank, untruthful, irrelevant, they're delaying or latent, and we want to isolate those invalid objections. Relative to price, one of the responses I like on a valid price objection, a response, the price is too high compared to what? Can you share, using some reflective questions, can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that? The price is too high compared to what? So make sure you isolate the objections, isolate the invalid versus the valid, and you do that with good research and preparation and with good questioning. So start with the right attitude. This is a process for uncovering and overcoming objections. Start with the right attitude. Don't internalize them and don't take them personally. Uncover that objection through the art and science of good questioning. Clarify that objection to ensure that it's valid or invalid. You want to address those objections, especially the invalid, head on. Acknowledge them, handle them. You don't always have to handle them all at once. And if you don't know the answer to a question or to an objection, honesty is the best policy because you don't have to justify ethical behavior. Tell them you don't know. You will check with the right internal Cisco SMEs or subject matter experts, and you will get back to them and then provide a timeline. But there's a strategy and process to successfully negotiating those objections. Again, don't be defensive. Don't disparage. Never argue. Show that you truly understand. Because if you argue with a prospect, a partner, or a customer, you don't win sales by winning arguments. You overcome objections by understanding them from the client's perspective, active listening, because our maker gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should be listening twice as much as we are speaking in a sales call or in a sales process. I believe when you're speaking, you're losing. When you're listening, you're winning. So some key objections as we talked about. Don't belabor the point because you risk insulting the customer, partner, client, prospect. Don't be drawn out and into twaddle, into pointless squabbles. That's why an agenda, as David mentioned in the presentation pillar of today's presentation, working off an agenda, being organized, getting there early. Confidence comes from competence, which comes from practice. You know, sometimes we see if we lose a deal that salesperson or that organization was lucky. No. Luck defined is when preparation meets opportunity. So when you prepare for those objections, you think them out, you do a dry run. And I love what Branch Rickey, a storied baseball manager from the Brooklyn Dodgers, said relative to luck. Luck is the residue of design. So don't be drawn into pointless squabbles or twaddle. Don't try to fake an answer. Admit you don't know, but promise you will get back to them promptly with the right answer. Confirm your answers, but don't question them by asking whether you're fully answered the client's or partner's questions. So answer them, be honest, be truthful. Don't get drawn into pointless squabbles or twaddle or fake an answer. So we address them head on. We don't get defensive. We use the art and science of active and pointed questions. Know when you've been set up. Know when to turn it over, perhaps, to another Cisco colleague that can answer it from a different perspective or point of view. And then practice the 3-second rule. Don't say anything. Count to 3 in your head. Think about what you're going to say. Restraint of pen and tongue. So as we discussed, we handle those objections by acknowledging them, probing through active who, what, when, where, why questions, answering them truthfully if we can, either individually or collectively as a team, one Cisco, and then close. Maybe it's ink to paper and a signature, or it's a logical next step to move the sales process forward by overcoming those objections. Make sure what you say is credible. If you're using third-party research from Gartner, the Yankee Group, etc., or an internal white paper from Cisco, make sure that the testimonials from existing or past customers are up to date. When you mention them, if you're using research, demonstrations, testimonials, make sure they're accurate, not out of date. And as we winnow down this session on the handling of objections, there's 3 areas that we really want to focus on as we distill it down. Best practices. Demonstrate real interest from the customer, prospect, or partner. Make sure you understand what those objections are. Recognize that objections are good, not bad. Objections are extremely positive. Indifference is a very strong negative. Because if you don't have objections, you have nothing to work with. It helps you build relationships, and really no meaningful negotiations happen until the client feeds back their areas of concern, pain, what objections they have to this solution, the pricing, the terms. And if you're very thorough in every part of the sales process, especially handling objections, it leads to the next session and our closing session, which is closing skills. So before I hand it over to David, remember, Lynn, your organization, the acronym, and we live in technology. David and I we had a heavy diet of technology and acronyms, is the U.S. Commercial Organization. I'd like you to reframe that. And USC now means understand that sales is competitive, but we work for an unbelievable sales culture. John's organization, APO, we're achieving positive outcomes for our organization. And Nick, in USPS in the public sector, unwavering sales professionals succeeding. With that, I hand the baton over to David to take us home for closing skills. Thank you, David.
Thanks, Doug. So we're really, when you think about it, we started out understanding the mapping of the buyer's journey and every step that needs to be involved with that. We did our discovery, understanding what their critical business needs are, how we're going to be able to position our value proposition. We've gone through the presentations, and we blew them away with our technology and how well our solutions are. And then we've really addressed all of their objections that they had out on the table. And so now when you think about it, boy, we're ready to close, aren't we? You think, right? But you got to ask yourself some questions before you start to close. And let me start by saying it's not time to close because it's your quarter end. You got to be asking yourself the questions of, have we reviewed that sequence of events? Have we reviewed that roadmap of what all the client needed to do before making a decision? And have we addressed every one of those? Do we have a compelling event that is driving them to make a decision? Because that's more than anything else will help you get to a decision now. And is your value proposition strong enough to justify the investment? Because that's what their client is going to be looking for. I will tell you this, it's sort of interesting. It seems like every technology company closes at different times. I've worked for companies that closed in September, December, May, March. And what amazes me is in every one of those companies, the one common theme and the one thing that was common amongst all the organizations is that about 60% of the revenues came in at the end of the quarter. Gosh, I wonder why that is. Do you think it has anything to do with the way the client buys or the way that they're evaluating it? I would submit to you no. About 25% of the revenues come in the second month of a quarter, and only 15% come in the first month of the quarter. We've really taught our clients how to buy from us over the years. And the reason why that's happened is what? Because we're focused on our year end rather than the compelling event and what's driving them to a decision, and that we've been able to resolve all the issues that they had. The challenge with that is we're 11 times more likely, though, to lose a deal in that last month of the quarter. 51% greater losses happen in that last month of the quarter, are deferred. So when you think about that, we're trying to close more business, yeah, but we're also losing a heck of a lot more deals. And why are we losing those deals? It's because we haven't gone back to understand that we've addressed all of the certain issues that they've got outstanding. The scary part is the average discount level in that last month of the quarter goes up 34.5%. 34.5%. That's revenue that the company could have. That's commission that you could retire, or a quota that you could retire, and commissions that you could make. But we're focused on our quarter in and not on the client's need and client's compelling event to make that decision. As you go into this, what you got to be focused on is the benefits and the value that you bring. What are those benefits? Are you increasing their productivity? Are you increasing their revenues? Or is it their time to market? It's the value of the data that you're helping provide. Are you reducing their cost? Because really, when you look at a value equation, it's really simple. It's benefits minus cost equal value. And we know that clients today are looking for under 12-month return on investment. And I would also tell you, they're going to be looking at that ROI and how quickly they can get it, more so today than ever, probably in any of our careers. As we pick back up, we had a great economy before, and now people are going to be trying to figure out, how do I get back to where I was? So the way to know whether or not you're really ready to close the deal, I think you got to start out and go, okay, did we really do the discovery that we needed to? Did we answer all the questions? Did we go through and address all the objections that they had? Have we addressed all the questions that they have? We know our presentation. Did our presentation really hit the areas that they really needed? And at that point in time, then we're ready to ask for the business. And if we're focusing on the value and the ROI, the price becomes sort of inconsequential. Yeah, you're still going to negotiate some, but if your real value is there, where do you think the client would be? I don't know if how many of you remember, I think they're still around, a company called i2. i2 used to offer their software for free to anybody out there. All they said was, we want 10% of the profits of what it generates for your company. That our solution provides you, we only want 10% of that. Never, not one client ever took advantage of that, but they sold a lot of software doing that. And the reason why no client did it is when they got them to believe the value of what they were bringing, that 10% became a huge number. And so clients said, no, I don't want to pay you that much money. But they believed in the value of it, and it was a great way to get them engaged. What I'd say to you is, when you look at the best practices, look, boy, there's so many of you on here that have been doing this for so many years, and you're really great at your job. And I don't want to offend anybody here by some of the basics of what we've talked about, but I hope what you look at is taking away just 1%. We go back to what Doug said at the very beginning of this presentation. Take just 1% of what we presented to you today in these different topics. Every one of you knows that one of the things that you got to be doing is always be closing, right? But what I would say to you is this: you may do a sequence of events today, or you may document what that roadmap looks like. I would submit to you, tighten that up very tight, right? Looking at it, challenge and question that from this point forward over the next couple of months, because it is going to change. And to the point I made earlier today, no one really understands what that's going to look like. So it's going to be very dynamic, more dynamic than it ever has been. So make sure that you take a look at that and in the way that you're trying to manage that process. And then again, as I've said here a couple of times, get the agreement from them on the value you're providing. If they don't believe in the value of what you're providing, and you haven't gained a commitment from them of that value or an agreement on that value that you're providing, you're not even ready for negotiation, because what they're saying to you is, we don't believe it. And that means they don't believe that if they don't believe in the value that you provide, they're sure not going to believe in the price that you're asking for it. So just think of those things. So if you think about it, what we've talked about the discovery, we've talked about the presentation, how to handle objections, and of course we got to hear the closing skills. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Doug for a couple of closing comments before we turn it over to Jay.
Thank you, David, and great content and thought leadership on closing skills. Thank you, everyone, on today's webinar. It's been a high honor and privilege. As we close out, remember, I challenged you, Cisco, the acronym, creating impactful sales conversations and outcomes. Be a leader, be human, and think about what's happening. As of March 20th, Chuck Robbins made a statement in the press that over 5.5 billion minutes of WebEx meetings were used. Through the end of March, I think that's north of 10 billion. You're well poised with the right attitude, getting back to the basics of selling. We know there's been a variety of different individuals, from seasoned veteran sellers to those early in their careers, and partners. So take this with you. Please, we ask you and challenge you to give 1% of your day, 14 minutes and 24 seconds, to practice these new skills. But most importantly, we will get through this, and as Warren Buffett said, this too shall pass, but let's have fun. And I'll leave you with this. There once was a man who never romped nor played. He never smoked, he never drank, nor even kissed a maid. And when he up and passed away, life insurance was denied. For since he never lived, they claimed he never died. Thank you, Team Cisco. Be safe. We'll get through this. Enjoy the rest of your webinars. Thank you, Jay.
All right, Doug, David, thank you very much for your investment in us. And I just want to emphasize just again, especially on this recording, and we're going to be providing this recording out for others to refresh their skills. But this is all about all of us within Cisco, from veterans to early in sales, early in career. This is a foundational session that really starts us off, because the future sessions that we plan to do and offer are going to be a crescendo and be built on top of these basic skill sets. We're going to talk about negotiation skills. We're going to be talking about how do you disrupt the status quo with your customer? How do we drive use cases through or try to drive outcome-based selling through use cases? We're going to have future sessions that's going to rely on just having this refresher that we've had the last couple of days. And I just want to leave you with a couple of things. Number one in particular is that, as Doug mentioned at the very beginning, the positive attitude is key in everything that we do. And giving 1% of your day to yourself and investing in yourself, this was what this was about. This is what our future sessions will always be about, or will be about, as well as giving that 1% back and helping you to continue to invest in yourself. So thank you very much for everyone joining. Doug, David, for your investment, and I look forward to the future sessions we're going to host later. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you.